Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, USA, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Happy 4th of July, everybody. And so our podcast, I guess, it is revolving, more or less around the theme of the 4th of July, I guess you could say. And I thought we'd start, the title even is The Integrity of a Nation. What does integrity mean? What does the integrity of a nation mean? I think even the word integrity, we could think about the meaning of that word. I think commonly people have a belief system or a code of ethics, if you will, and by adhering to that belief system, I think they would feel like they are in integrity, But if you think about it, there are a lot of different belief systems out there, and a lot of them contradict. And to use extreme examples, I guess the ISIS people thought they were living in integrity, and a lot of really militant groups, thought they were in integrity. So, where's the word integrity? What's it really mean? Where does true integrity actually come from? It doesn't come from a belief system. It lies in a place deeper than that. It lies in para. What's called para. Para, in English, they spell it P-A-R-A. Para means kind of means like the transcendent, the unbounded basis of all existence. But it's also interesting that sometimes the word para is used to mean like innocence, but not some superficial notion of innocence. I've talked before about how there's a difference between innocence and naivete, and innocence just means coming from the purity of one's own being, the depth of one's own being. And so if we're really in integrity when we're coming from para, it's in the medical field, being a veterinarian, we use the word tissue integrity. Is a tissue healthy? Is it elastic, and does it feel healthy, or is it friable? In other words, breaks down easily to touch even. And so integrity there just means kind of like health, bala, strength. So health, bala, a person with just radiant good health, we would say they have, bala, they're coming from what? The power level, the inner intelligence of their own physiology, you see, and that's integrity. And so when we talk about individuals and coming from integrity, we're talking about that place of inner depth, now inner wisdom. Now, I think a lot of times when we talk about coming from the depth of your soul, people might almost equate that with passion. And if you're intensely passionate about something, then you're coming from the depth of your being. You're so passionate about it. That's my truth, But really, real integrity, real depth of your soul, oftentimes looks more reflective than that. It's more of a place of inner silence and inner wisdom and profundity. And it can be riddled with things that can appear to be such profound paradoxes, such profound contradictions, like Socrates, the only true knowing is knowing you know nothing. What does that mean? Well, it means innocence, really. It means not being identified with something that says, well, if I jump through these hoops and conform to these rules, then I'm living in my integrity. But rather, it comes from a place of no thingness, that which lies beyond things. And it's that state of power, the quality of the unbounded, the transcendental value. And from there, we integrate our being on all levels with that transgradient, if you will, from the depth all the way to the surface. And so that's what it means to live in our integrity. And it doesn't necessarily, probably doesn't correspond with notions of integrity, of one belief system, one doctrine, one group of people or another. Socrates said another interesting thing. It's a famous quote. He said, define yourself, think for yourself. What, okay, that's great. Think for yourself. But what does think for yourself mean? I think it was popular 20, 30 years ago, the hippie movement, I guess, or whatever. A man who hears a different drum, a drumming, which came, I guess, originally from Thoreau. And, that's what it means to be free. That's what it means to be independent. That's what it means to find yourself and to know yourself. Oh, if it were only that simple, because particularly when to hear a different drum, a drumming becomes your war cry and becomes a popular war cry, then it's not hearing a different drum, a drumming, it's dancing to the same drum beat that everybody else is dancing to, which is rebellion, really. So there's a difference between integrity and just plain, rebellion. But para, it's interesting that another word they use for it is unreachable. So you can't grab onto it. It's not a thing. You can't define it. But, how many of us look to see if we are coming from a place of integrity, to see if there's some rule book, something we can grab onto and conform to, and then, okay, we're living in our integrity. We're living in our, in accord with our own divinity, At first glance, we might wonder what this has to do with 4th of July. I don't know. Maybe we do. Benjamin Franklin, after they created the Constitution and all that, evidently somebody, thanked him for creating the Republic, and he responded something to the effect that, well, now we've given it to you, let's see how long you can keep it, because if you really look at the idealized notion, now keep in mind, one place we get in trouble is that, we might be inclined to throw out the baby with the bathwater. In other words, every nation, every culture, every individual, every person has done things that aren't ideal, done things that aren't imperfect, that aren't perfect. And we in this world, particularly today, with all of the personal attacks and then the polarity and polarization and negativity, we tend to define people by the worst thing they've ever done. And that's defining the baby with the bathwater. Oh, the bathwater is dirty, therefore the person is bad. No. So the same applies to nations. There's an ideal in our nation. There's an ideal in the Constitution. Even the Constitution wasn't perfect. It even says, forming more perfect union. They know that what they did wasn't perfect, but it pointed in a direction. It aspired to something. And that aspiration, if you really look at it, freedom, independence, that whole idea, and honor, dignity, integrity, it all pointed in a direction. And I think a couple things in history that really sort of say it in a nutshell. George Washington had a general from Europe, and he was training the troops. I guess he did a really good job. But he wrote back to his friends in Europe, and he said, these Americans, he says, if you tell them to do something, they won't do it unless you explain to them why. And once they know why, then they'll do it. Now, it's very interesting because, and I think if you think about it, it really does speak to the essence of the nature of the foundation of this country. It was formed in a way that honored people's individuality, honored the para value that dwelled within the depth of every being, and was structured in a way where it enabled people to find that within their own selves. Now, that's no simple task. It's not easy to do. Uh, like with Socrates, when he said, define yourself, think for yourself. Not easy to do. It's because so often our thoughts are so conditioned and so programmed based on superficial values and indoctrinations, and we can get so passionate about them. But again, passion is not really equivalent of our truth. We can become passionate about things that aren't necessarily in harmony with nature, consistent with our own true nature, you see. The Wimbledon is going on now, and one thing I like about professional tennis, I think particularly the singles, is just by watching, you get a real feel for the personality, the individuality of each of the players. And they're from all over the world, and some of the interviews are just beautiful. They were interviewing Djokovic, who's, the best player in the world right now. And they asked him what made him so tenacious about winning, and he's just so committed and so strong, and his response, I really liked his response, because I've always thought this about him, but I never said it or never thought about it as something to verbalize. But he was saying that Sarajevo, I guess, is where he's from, and he said in growing up, his whole country was in terrible conflict. And so he and his family had to really be strong and self-reliant just to get through it. And he felt like that kind of created something in him. And one of the beautiful things about it is, even when he mentioned his home country and all that, the crowd during the interview, because he was interviewed on court after he won a match, and they just cheered. They responded so beautifully. And even though these words weren't used, it was just such an affirmation of the honoring of the deeper integrity of a nation, the deeper integrity of a culture, even when it was in such chaos. There's a moral fiber there that people aspire to. That's the baby. All the conflict and stuff, that's the bathwater. But then Medvedev, another great tennis player, they interviewed him. Oh, and they started talking about sports. And because England, I think, is in some soccer final thing or whatever. And they were asking him about that. And he said, well, of course, he said, I'm for Russia. And just because he's Russian, and see, it speaks to the heartfelt nature of what every nation should aspire to. The baby, not the bathwater, but the baby. In culturing and nurturing that baby, it's the fine fabric that underlies a culture, that feeds a culture. It's that the roots of the nation go all the way into the power of value and well up through that nation to feed and support the people. So to attack a nation, our own nation, I understand, because there are travesties, there are injustices. Every person has done things that weren't right. Every nation has done things that weren't right. And if we get caught up in that, and we define a nation by the worst thing it's ever done, and it's not life supporting, you see. And so the 4th of July, Independence Day, it's a day where we're celebrating all of these values and the deeper power of value that wells up through our country. And it's a reaffirmation of that, you see. Yes, those values are the values of our culture. It's what cultures are being. And those ideals are our ideals on the deepest level of our being. deeper even than perhaps our passions of how passionate we are about the horrific things that this nation has done, that every nation has done, you see? So it's a time by feeding the baby, we purify out the bathwater, you see? And that's the whole idea here. Now, the another interesting thing in history is the Alamo. Uh, what was it? 1836, I believe. There was a commitment there to a spirit that to this day so embodies that deeper spirit of what our nation is about. And really, every nation is about self-actualization. Self-actualization is a big word in psychotherapy. People aspire, if you, even in business, they talk about the most important thing to an individual isn't how much money they're making, so much as it's about self-actualization. If they can really actualize themselves, the money will come, you see. But self-actualization is what feeds the soul, which it feeds the spirit. And really, at the Alamo, these people were dedicated to the notion that we weren't going to allow a tyrannical government to have its thumb on us. We were committed to a world where we lived in the freedom to pursue our own self-actualization, you see? And so the Alamo really became a symbol of that, not just for the state of Texas, but for our whole nation. And you'll see it, all over the world. But these things have become so abused in different times of history. And I've cited like the Bolshevik Revolution, a great example. They rebelled against the Tsar. Why? What was the main thing? It was created by a bunch of bankers in New York, Germany, and England, I think it was, maybe South Africa, maybe, I can't. Anyway, bankers created that to overthrow the current czar, to overthrow the government so that they could gain control of the economy. It was all done of, by, and for the money, you see? And so that stands as a warning, as a wake-up call to our nation and every nation throughout time, really, that we can become so passionate about something that we give our lives for it, we revolt, we overthrow the current government, we do whatever it is we do, and we do well, then to look deeper than those passions. Find truth deep within ourselves. And that requires, like Socrates said, to think. But again, thought isn't enough because the thought needs to be rooted in that deeper place that we access through our finest feelings levels, not our indoctrinated passions, but that place where we're one with Para, where we awaken to and live in harmony with that mother nature, the nature of life, you see. This whole idea of entitlement, there was something I saw very interesting about entitlement, entitlement versus self-actualization, we're entitled to, I don't know, live this certain level of life. And so it has to be given to us, or how, in whatever form that may mean. Entitlement, if you think about it, it's the ultimate opiate. It undermines self-actualization. We don't need to self-actualize, because if we're Marie Antoinette or whomever we are, we're just entitled to be given all these things. And it just strips us of our own, they talk about the dignity of work. Well, yeah, I get that. But I think from what we're talking here today, I think maybe it's a little deeper understanding than, work, you have dignity because you work. Yeah, that's true. But why? Because self-actualization, because coming from that power value, So I think the deeper our understanding goes of these things, really, the better off we are. So fighting for self-actualization isn't just acting out irresponsibly or just having a temper tantrum of rebellion because we feel confined, we feel limited, we feel unfulfilled, we feel cheated, we feel abused, we have seen injustices. And boy, I tell you, I can get passionate about that. I mean, there have been some terrible injustices perpetrated on other people, perpetrated on the world, perpetrated on me, perpetrated on you. But we have to look deeper. Yeah, we feel that, we see that, we know that. But if we react too passionately without coming from a deeper place of wisdom, we compromise ourselves. There's a nice quote that I put in the blog introducing this podcast, and it's from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And so you might want to go to the blog and read that. I thought it was very nice. Scott and Adrian, what else?
Yeah.
Oh, 4th of July, this is pretty interesting, is that fireworks, they're having fireworks all over the country, right? And they didn't, some time ago because of social distancing, but now evidently they're saying, okay, fine. So they're doing it all over. But it's being disallowed at Mount Rushmore. And evidently the people who live in South Dakota are like, it's just rock, there's no fire hazard, and it can't be a social distancing issue because they're allowing it so many other places in the country. So I ask you, Adrian, what do you think? I mean, what's the deal, Scott? I mean, why won't they allow it at Mount Rushmore? Or maybe we want to just leave that for people to ponder themselves, But it just seems to me that, I don't know, there's so many things that I'm just trying to put together in my own head. I need to understand why. I wish there was a explanation that, would satisfy. I saw it on the news again, that guy in some spa in California, completely naked, fully exposed, identifies as being a woman. So he was walking into the women's shower area with young girls and everything. And I can't put it together. It just doesn't make sense to me, I mean, I can hear the rationales, I can hear the justifications, but on a deeper level of my being, I'm sorry, I just can't do it, And there are so many things like that going on in the world today. And I don't want to take too many sides because I'd rather you decide for yourself. I just ask you to look deeper, go beyond your identity, go beyond your indoctrinations, go beyond what passions have been stirred in you. Find a deeper place. And I say that with respect to so many things, the border. It's you decide, but think, reflect, ponder. Does it make sense? And what makes sense? Stronger borders or no borders or something in between? It's up to you. Also, defunding the police. Think about it. Really think about it. Maybe it should happen. Maybe it shouldn't happen. The decision is yours. All I'm asking, and particularly at this time in the history of our nation, with all of the incredible conflict and tension in the world, so much is going on, so many contentious things. I mean, we could make a long list, but I think you all know that list, really. And where do you come out in that, and why? And because this nation, it's going to tip one way or the other, isn't it? And the direction it tips, the direction it goes, it's a function of the sum total of the individuals in that country. It is not a time to be passive. There was a time when I knew people, I just don't watch the news. I can't. It's not a time for that. I'm sorry. We have to really look at what's going on and really reflect and ponder deeply. And I think there's no other day of the year, perhaps, that's more appropriate to say that than here, the 4th of July, Independence Day, the integrity of our culture, the integrity of our nation. You see? All right. That's all I got. Scott, Adrian, if you have anything to add, it'd be great. You know,
No,
it's
I think that's a continuation of what we've been talking about, what you've been talking about for a long time now, is trying to make sense of things that don't seem to make sense, and somehow coming from a deeper level than just the reactionary levels on the top of our, that come from the surface of our personalities, you know.
yeah, that's from
And
the surface of our lives. That's right. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. And so it's a continuation, but I think, you know, with everything going on in our country, and the news stations and what's up all the time on social media, there's just these hot buttons that are pushed continually
Yeah.
from every direction. It's exhausting.
And even the vaccine, we didn't even talk about the COVID vaccine. And I mean, that could be a whole other podcast, but I mean, the conflicts, the disagreements, the alleged corruptions and everything, even in that regard, you know? And see, it goes to a point too, though, that this whole idea of extrapolation, you know, it keeps going. The pyramid swings and overdoes itself. Cultural integrity is a good thing, but racism is cultural integrity gone insane. That's just one example. Cultural integrity, a good thing. Racism, of course, not. And so many things are like that. Find the balance. It's finding the balance that's critical. This extreme, no. That extreme, no. Somewhere in between, though, there's wisdom. You see? I guess that's what Buddha meant by the middle way. I don't know. Anything else?
Well, I think as messed up as the U.S. is right now, it's still pretty amazing place when you consider, you know, what it is that you can have in other places. You know what I mean? It's like,
I think we do well. Yeah, that's a good point, Scotty. To just live in, I've lived in third world countries, not a whole lot, maybe a few years of my life. You know, India, Philippines, I don't know where else. And you learn a lot.
Yeah.
You know, seeing people live in cardboard boxes and things, whole cities and everything. And that's the majority of the population. It opens your eyes, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a great 4th of July. Bye for now.